Alright, so in this video we're going to have our first look at using control flow. Now control flow is basically ways that allow us to execute different paths of our code or different code paths based on certain conditions. So Ruby has a few different ways of setting up control flow. There's things like if statements, unless statements, there's ternary operators, there's case statements. So in this video we're going to explore all of those, and we've been working in IRB a lot to kind of familiarize ourselves with our basic data types and structures. In this video we're going to switch gears a bit and write our first Ruby program file. Well, our second Ruby program file. We initially wrote one in the Introduction to IRB and Running Ruby Programs video, but in this one, how we're going to learn about how to use control flow, we're going to utilize a Ruby program file, and then we will execute that program over in our terminal on the command line. So with that out of the way, let's get started. All right, so the first thing I want to do is let's open up Visual Studio Code. And then I want to install some extensions here. So over on the left, we can click Extensions. And the first one I want to install is called Standard Ruby. Right here. What this will do is this will give us consistent formatting for our Ruby code. So especially later on when you start working with other developers, and people put spaces some places where others don't. Some use parentheses, some don't, that sort of thing. This will auto format it for us so that we have consistent styling in our projects that we are working on, either by ourselves or with others, so that we don't have to constantly request changes from folks to conform to the standard way of writing things. So this will handle that for us. It will, I believe, automatically run it for us as we save our Ruby files. So this will be a great one. We'll click install right here and let that install. Okay, so now that we've got the standard Ruby extension installed, the next one we're going to install is the Ruby extension. So just this one right here, we're going to click install on that. It will say it's installing, take some time, install. Great, now we're good to go. So now let's go back over to our Explorer here and see what let's talk about what we're going to create here. So I think a fun thing for us to build right now would just be kind of a simple password manager for us. This will allow us to learn about control flow and practice a lot of the things that we've been working with in the previous videos up to this point. So what I'm thinking is we'll just get started very simply. We'll make a new file over here. So we can click this button here for new file, and it will open or prompt us to enter the file name. And you can name this file whatever you want. You can get creative with the name. I'm going to call it none shall pass.rb. And this is just a silly little name I thought of for or I misspelled none here. I need to put an E at the end here. None shall pass. So this is just, again, a silly little name I thought of for the password manager. So yeah, so that's the name of our file. Again, you can name it whatever you want. It doesn't matter, just you'll have to use your name when you go to run the program versus the name that I'm going to use here if you choose to name it differently. So let's hit enter on that. Once we do, we get dropped into our file and we can start writing some Ruby code. Okay, so kind of what I'm thinking to start off is we need some way to log into our password manager, right? We need some way to know that the person trying to get into this file and read the contents of some of the things in it is the person who owns the file and the permissions to get to these passwords, has that level of authorization. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to define two things at the top of this file known as constants. Now, constants in Ruby we haven't talked about. We'll see constants and talk about them more through this section and through the Rails section of the learning path. But they look like variables, but the difference you'll see is that we're going to write them in all capital letters. Now they don't have to be in all capital letters, but the first character definitely needs to be a capital letter for it for Ruby to pick up on it as a constant. So for example, the first one we're going to write here is called username. So I'm going to say username, oops, and then do some assignment here. And then inside of here, we need to maybe put a username, or this could be email. If you wanted it to be an email constant, we could do that. We could say email, kind of whatever you want to do. I'll let you pick what you want to do here. I'll go with email for now. So now we want to say email, and then the credential that we want to be permitted for the email for mocking out that we're logging into our password manager here. I'm just going to put a fake email in here for now. I'll put colin@example.com. Okay. All right. So the next thing we want to do is probably set some sort of password constant here. So let's say password. So as the person setting this up, we can set our password and be able to log in to our program here. For password, since I like to skateboard, I'm just going to say go skate. So let's save that off, and let's look at the next steps. Let me talk a little bit about constants in Ruby. So most other programming languages have the concept of constants, and typically once you do an assignment of those to those constants, you're not supposed to change the value, and most programming languages will not allow you to change the values that the constants refer to or point to. Ruby, however, is different. In fact, in the fact that it will allow you to change the what the constant refers to, but it presents a warning to you. So we can quickly hop into IRB, and I can show you that. So over in our terminal, let's hop into IRB real quick, and let's rewrite our email constant here. So I'll do colin@example.com. Okay, and if we recall our email variable, if I can type, or a constant, we see that we get back colin@example.com. That's what's returned to us. If we try to reassign this, we'll see that Ruby will allow us to do so. Let's do chris@example.com. It allows us to do this, but we get two warnings. Warning, already initialized constant email, and previous definition of email was here. So it's letting us know that, hey, you've already declared or initialized this constant, and there used to be something else that it pointed to, but now it's pointing at something different. And we can see that if we recall our email constant here, it now gives us back Chris. So it will allow us to change the value that it refers to, that the constant refers to, but it will give you warnings to it. So something to be aware of, that you can change the value of a constant, even though it's the name is constant. It's not actually constant. It doesn't forbid you from changing the value. And also, just to show that constants don't have to be all capital letters. That's kind of a convention you'll see, that most people will make constants all capital letters, with the exception of things like classes and modules, and we'll see that in the future. Classes and modules, most people tend to write them with first single capital letter and then lowercase for everything else. But if we do this right here, ASDF, for example, so that's our password. If we recall it, we get ASDF back. Now, if we try to reassign this, we'll see that we get the same two warnings that we got before. So let's go the other way with this. So you see we get the same warnings, and then password has been updated to FDSA. So just know that you can write these constants both ways, and we'll see examples of, again, like how most people choose to write them, either all caps or just with the first letter capitalized, as we progress through this section of the learning path, and then also as you get into the Rails section. So with this little detour into the world of constants out of the way, let's hop back into our program file and think about what we want to do next. So I think the first thing we'd want to do when we run our program is we'd like to be prompted in some sort of way. Okay, so maybe like welcome to the program, and then maybe we start to prompt them to enter their credentials in order to actually access the rest of our program. So let's first look at just showing a prompt message. So we've seen this before. We can use puts to output stuff to the terminal. So let's use puts here. Let's say puts, welcome to none shall pass. And then maybe say a password manager. Okay, So that's that. Let's go ahead and save that file. And now let's run this program just to check it real quick and make sure that we have a working program here. So again, the way to run that program is we call on the Ruby interpreter and we pass the program file that we want to execute to it. So we'll say Ruby and then none shall pass.rb. If we hit enter on that, we see our hello message or our welcome message. Welcome to none shall pass, a password manager. So perfect. So far so good. Our program doesn't have any issues with running. So the next step I think would be to prompt the user to enter their email and password. So let's do that next. Okay, so maybe the next thing we can say to our user is let's do another puts and say, please sign in to continue. And then we'll end that string. And then on the next line, we can say, let's do a print this time. Let's say enter email. Okay, and we'll do a colon and then add a space there. So that this way, we're using print this time so that it appears on one line. So we'll see the enter email, and then when the user goes to type, it will be on the same line as that line prompting them to enter their email. So let's go take a look at that real quick. Let's save this, and then let's go back to our terminal. And back over into our terminal here, I'm just going to clear it out, and then I'll recall the last thing that we ran, which was the passing our program file to the Ruby interpreter. If we hit enter on this, then we see that we get the prompt. Welcome. So we still get our welcome message. Please sign in to continue, and then we get prompted to enter the email here. All right. So back in our program now, we need some way for to get user input from the terminal back into our program. Now this will be something new that we haven't seen yet, but Ruby offers us a way to do this via a method called gets. So gets will allow our program to halt and wait for a user to enter some input when prompted in the terminal, for example, as we're being right now with our program to enter an email. It will then allow the user to type, and when they hit enter, it will capture that input, and then we can use that in our program, but we will need to save it to a variable here. So let's do that now. So what we can do is let's save this to a local variable called user_email. And so we'll assign that to the value of the gets method here. So let's just save our program right here, and let's go back to our terminal and run this. So back in our terminal here, if we recall our last command and we hit enter here, we see that we get our prompts, our welcomes, and we get prompted to enter our email, and our program is just hanging here waiting for us to type something. So if we do that and we hit enter here, then we see our program finally exits out. But let's look at what happened there. So let's go back to our program file, and let's use the print command to print out the value that we are storing in the user email local variable here. So we'll say print user email, and then we'll save that. We will go back to our terminal. I'm gonna clear this out, and we will rerun our program here. So we get prompted again. I'll just enter something and then hit enter. And then we see that we have saved off the value of ASDF to that local variable for user email right here. But one thing I want to point out here is if we go back over here and we change this to use the P method to print our output here, let's go back now and rerun our program. If we do so and we enter something here and we see what is returned to us, we see more of the actual representation of what is saved to that local variable user_email. Now we see here that we have a new line character added, but we only typed ASDF. This new line character was added when the user hits enter to enter their input to our program. So if we try to compare this value to the email that we are storing as our main account email here, if we're trying to compare these two values, even if we typed in the right thing instead of ASDF over on the terminal, if we typed colin@example.com over in our terminal and hit enter and we try to compare these two strings, they're not going to be equal because the one coming from the terminal is going to have that extra new line character. So we need a way to remove that from any input that we get from the user. And the way we can do that is by using the chomp method, and we can call that on the result of the gets method here. So I'll just say, I'll say gets.chomp. So that will go ahead and remove that new line character for us. And we can double check this if we rerun our program here and we type ASDF, we see that that new line character is gone. So let's see, Colin, at example.com. We see that there's no new line character in there as well. So that new line character from the user hitting return or enter is being chopped off from the end of our string, which is good. We want that. So let's look at the next steps. So now that we have that out of the way, let's get rid of this line here and think about our next steps. One thing we could do is we could ask the user next to enter their password. But if they entered the wrong email to begin with, maybe we ought to just short circuit things and let them know that they entered an invalid email and then exit our program. So this is where we're going to see our first conditional. So the most simplest form of conditional is the if statement. It looks like this. So you write the keyword if. Now if is one of many reserved words in Ruby. You cannot use this word as a local variable or a method or anything like that. It is reserved strictly for Ruby's usage. So we write if, and then I'm just going to write a comment here. Some condition is true. And also this is how you write comments in Ruby. You start with a hash symbol, and anything following that hash symbol will be considered a comment in Ruby. So just know that, and we'll see comments throughout the rest of the course here, I'm sure. So if some conditional is true, then on the next line what we want to do is execute some code. Okay? And then you end that with the end keyword. So this is your basic conditional here, is the if statement. Now you can have several branches with this. The way we would do that is say this condition is not true right now, nothing would happen, our program would just exit. But if we wanted to handle the case where whatever condition we are setting up right here is false and we want to run some different code, what we can do is we can use an else clause. So inside of the if, in between the if and the end, we can say else right here, and then in between the else and the end, we would execute some other chunk of code. Okay, so this is a little bit, this is the next step from the basic if statement, just if by itself. So now we have two branches here that are two code paths we can take with our program here. So let's start filling this in. So the first thing we want to do is let's decide what this condition is here. So we want to check that whatever the user supplied on the command line as their email matches the email that we've set up here. So the way we would do that is we could say if user underscore email is equal to email. Now this equal here is double equal signs. It's not a single equal sign, because a single equal sign would be considered assignment, and that is not what we want. We want comparison here, so we want to see if these two when compared against each other are equal. So if they are equal, then we want to do one thing. If they are not, here's where we would want to tell them invalid email and then exit our program. So let's fill out this else clause here. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just get rid of this, and then let's say else. And let's do a little put statement here and just say invalid email, and then we can type exit here. And if we save that and then we go back to our terminal, we can clear this out. We can run our program again. And now let's enter a fake email. Let's just say blah@food.com. Now we see we get invalid email here, but now let's try where we entered the correct email. So we'll say colin@example.com. Hit enter there, and we don't see the invalid email message, but our program falls through because we're not handling anything further from here. We have not filled in this section of the code to where, as we just did, we entered the right email address, so this comparison returned true. We don't do anything inside the body here, this if statement in the if branch, to handle the next steps. So this is where we could, now that they've entered the correct email, we could prompt them to enter their password. So let's just give that a go for now. Let's say print, let's say enter password, and we'll do a colon and add a space there. And then again, we want to capture the input from the user, and we're going to want to store that into a local variable here. So let's say user password equals, and then we want to call that gets method, gets.chomp, to make sure that we remove the new line character. Okay, and let's try this out now. So we go back to our terminal here and we clear this out. Let's rerun our program, and we'll say colon at example.com. Okay, now we get prompted for our password. We can enter whatever here. It doesn't matter because we're not handling the next steps here of checking if the password is a match. So let's do that next. So we could nest conditionals. We could then now write another if statement inside of this if statement here. But that gets a little bit messy somewhat quickly when you start nesting conditionals. So one thing we can do is this variable here is not going to, it's not out of scope being inside of this if statement here, and we'll talk more about scope in the future, but we have access to it beyond these keywords of if, else, and end. So we can go into a new line here, and we can say if user password is equal to password, password, then we can set up another conditional here. So we could continue writing ifs, but let's use let's look at another way to write this. So in addition to the if statement, there's also the unless statement. So let's see that next. So in the case of using the unless, we're going to need to flip this comparison a little bit. So we would use start off with the unless keyword. So unless, and then we want to say unless user password is not equal to password. Now we do not equals with the exclamation point equals or bang equals. This oftentimes is referred to as a bang. So we'll say bang equals. So unless user password is not equal to password, and then let's just end this off for now, and we can fill in the body of this conditional next. So unless will always run the code that is written inside of it unless this condition returns true. So unless the user supplied password is not equal to the main password up here, go ahead and run the code within the body of this conditional here. So maybe what we can do inside of here is, since at this point the user should have supplied the correct email and the correct password, we can say puts, I don't know, maybe or let's not do welcome. We already did a welcome here. Let's say hello, and then let's interpolate their email perhaps. So let's just say hello user email, and then let's put a period here, and then on the next line we could say maybe let's start showing them a menu of options they can select from. So let's first say, what would you like to do? Question mark. And then we can show them a list. Let's say puts one. Maybe in the first case of the first selection, they want to add a new service to set up credentials for. So let's say add new service credentials. And then as a second option, just for now, let's just do two. So let's say to retrieve. Let's retrieve an existing services credentials. Okay, so perfect. Let's save this. Let's go back to our terminal and try and run this program now and see what we get. So back over in our terminal, let's go ahead and run our program. Okay, so now it's asking us for our email. We'll say colon at example.com. example.com. Password is go skate. Okay, so now that we've entered the correct password, we see that we get asked the question, what would you like to do? And then we get our menu list of options here. Before we go further into setting up anything with the making selections from the menu of options here, let's handle the case where the user might supply an incorrect password. Okay, so back over here, much like with our if statements, we can also add an else inside the unless if we wanted to. Now, I would say that this is not typical. If you're going to use an else with an unless, you should probably go to using an if and flip this to be a more positive case, like we're doing here, where we're checking, that it's like positive equality versus like not equal. But just to show that it can be done and to show us an example of using the unless clause here, I wanted to continue on with this. So let's add an else here. And then inside of here, we can say, similar to how we did right here, we can just say down here, let's say puts invalid password. And then let's go ahead and exit our program. Exit is also a keyword in Ruby. It will cause your program to terminate right there. And then at that point, no other code beyond this that could run would run. So with that, let's save this and go back to our terminal here and clear this out, and let's rerun this again. So let's put in the proper email address here, colin@example.com, and then password, let's put in the wrong password here, and now we see we get our invalid password message shown back to us, and our program exits. Back over in our program, let's actually come up here and give a third choice to exit the program. So we'll do puts 3 exit like that. Perfect. Now in here we want to do similar to what we did here and here. We want to call gets.chomp and wait for some input, a selection from the menu here. So let's say let's make a local variable, call it user selection, and we'll set that equal to calling gets.chomp. Okay, so we'll get that selection, and now we can start a new conditional. We'll see a third option for us for writing conditionals called a case statement. So for a case statement, we start with the case keyword, which is just like this, and then we have to write something here that is going to be an expression that will be evaluated, and the result of that expression being evaluated is going to be taken and used to check to match against different when clauses or when cases, for example. So in our case, we want to be checking the user selection local variable. So that's going to hold either, ideally we want the user to type in 1, 2, or 3. That's going to come into our program as a string. So our case here is going to look at user selection, and then we write some when branches. So we'll say when, and then we can pass the string of 1 here, for example. And then let's just say puts this will create a new service, for example, just as a placeholder for now. New service, or let's this will create new service credentials. All right, and then when 2, the string of 2, we want to say, let's just say for now this will retrieve existing credentials, just like this, if I can type. And then for the third case, we could say when string of 3, go ahead and puts exiting and exit our program. Or we can kind of make a catch-all here for anything that is not either a 1 or 2 selection from the user. So we could say, we could end this off with an else here and say exiting the program, goodbye. And then we can go ahead and say exit here and then end off our case statement. So let's go ahead and hop over to our terminal and run this a few times. All right, so over in our terminal, let's go ahead and run our program. Let's log in correctly. We'll say colin@example.com. Password is go skate. Okay, so if we hit a 1 right here, we should see this will create a new service credentials. So that's good. Let's rerun it again, and with the same thing, let's go ahead and log in correctly, and then go skate. We'll do 2 this time, and we'll see that this will retrieve existing credentials. So this is good. So our case statement is working. It's evaluating. It's looking at what is held in the, or what is referenced by the user selection variable here, local variable, and currently when we hit 1 or 2, that's coming in as a string to our gets method here. That's going to have a new line character at the end of it. We're chomping that off, so then we should only be left with the string of 1 or 2. Sorry, I forgot a puts right here, so let's add a puts right here, save this, and go back and try this again here. I'll clear that out. So we're going to run our program again. Colin at example.com, go skate, and then if we hit 3 right here, we see exiting the program. Now, if we don't hit anything, or we just hit some random whatever characters, we should also get exited, or we should also exit the program. So if I type a bunch of gibberish right here and hit enter, we get exiting the program. Alternatively, if we just hit enter on it and don't enter anything, we should get that same behavior here. Go skate. And if I just hit enter, exiting the program, done. So great. So that's case statements. And now let's look at filling out these case statements, these when clauses or when branches with some code to actually gather the name of a new service and then prompt the user to enter credentials for that, and how are we going to store that. All right, so back over in our program file here, let's start thinking about this first case here for when a user needs or wants to create a new service and assign credentials for that service. So think about something like Gmail, for example, where you want to store perhaps like the email address that you use for that, and then the password used for that as well. So how are we going to store this information here? So I'm thinking what we should do here is we should make a new constant called something like, if we go to the top of the file here, called something like password vault. So we'll do password underscore vault, and then we're going to assign this to an empty hash for now. So right here is where we need to start handling the prompts for allowing a user to give us the information for the new credential that they want to insert into that hash. So to get started, let's simply say, let's get rid of this line here, and let's use a print statement that says, enter the name of the service, for example. Enter the name of the service. Okay, so we'll do our normal colon ending point and give it a space there. And now, so that's going to prompt the user for some input, as we've been doing time and time again. We want to use gets to be able to wait for some input from the user, and we want to chomp off that new line character, and we want to assign that result to some local variable here. So let's say, let's make a new local variable called new service. Set that equal to the result of calling gets and then calling the chomp method on gets. Okay, so now that we've got the input from the user as far as the name of the service, what we can do now is we can go grab our password vault. Remember that points to an empty hash is what this constant references now. And then if we go back down here we are. So we can say password vault. And then what we can do is we can open up brackets and pass in new service right here. Okay, so as we did previously in the video on hashes, we keyed into a hash with a symbol or a string. In this case, the new service is coming in as a string. So, and that's going to hold the name of the service that we want to store credentials for. So again, like I mentioned before, it could be Gmail, it could be AWS, any service. So we have the name of the service here. So we're going to set that as the top level key here. And what we can do to start is just key into the password vault hash with that service name. and then we could set it equal to an empty hash. So in this situation, let's say we prompt the user to enter the name of the service, and they enter AWS and hit enter. We're going to have the string of AWS. We're going to key into the password vault hash with that. That key does not exist. And actually what we're doing here is we are going to assign that key to point to an empty hash. So we have a nested hash situation here. So it would be password vault is a hash that will have a top level key called AWS that will point to an empty hash right now. So for example, we can check this now. Let's go ahead and let's do a P call right here for password vault, and then let's just print that out and see what we get here. So let's go back to our terminal, and then let's run our program here. We will sign in, Colin at example.com. Password is GoSkate. Okay. So we want to add a new service here, so we're going to enter 1. Now we get prompted to enter the name of the service, and let's just say AWS. And we hit enter right here. Now we see printed out the result of our password vault constant here, this right here. So that constant, remember, we set it equal at the top of our file to an empty hash, and then once we got input from the user for the name of the new service they want to add, we set a top level key with that name and assign that to point to an empty hash. So now what we would like to do is let's get rid of this line here. Now we want to further prompt them to enter their username and password for this service. So let's say print please enter the username for this new service. Okay, and then we'll end that with a colon and a space. So then we'll again, we want to use gets and chomp together to wait to get that input from the user and remove the new line character. So let's say new service username equals gets.chomp. Okay. So now we'll get that. So now what we want to do is we want to then say we want to key into the password vault hash based off of the new service name. So in our case, over in the terminal there, we're going to use the AWS string. That's going to return to us this hash right here. Okay. So now inside of that hash, we want to add a new key for username. So what we can do is inside here, we can open string username. Okay. And then what we can do is set that equal to the result of what the user gave us with new service username, just like that. So now let's go ahead and write our password vault, our print statement for password vault here, or a P statement for that. Let's save this file, go back to our terminal, clear this out. Let's run our program again. So let's see, Colin at example.com. Go skate password. We want to add a new service, number 1. That service is going to be AWS. Please enter the username for this service, and let's just say Colin, for example. And now we see when we enter that, we have assigned the value Colin to be pointed to by the username key inside the AWS hash. Okay, so the next thing we need to do in this part is we need to capture the password for this new service. So let's go ahead and do that now. Let's write a print statement here. Let's say, please enter the password for this new service. Just like that. And then on the next line, we just like before, let's do new service password right here. And then we want to set that equal to, you guessed it, the result of calling gets.chomp. Okay, so now that we have that, let's give ourselves some space here so that we can kind of see the steps that we're taking here. So let's add a space here, and add a space here. Oh, actually, I'm sorry, I want to keep this one there. I meant to put that space here. So now what we want to do is similar to on line 39 right here. We want to do the same thing, but for password this time. So we will say password vault. We want to key into that for the new service, which will be the string of AWS in our example that we're working with in the terminal. That's going to return to us a hash. Now, what we want to do is we want to add a new key to that hash for password and assign it the value that we got and are storing in the new service password, or referencing with the new service password local variable on the line above. So we'll open up another set of brackets here. We can do the string password just like this, and we could pass a symbol here too. That would be fine. So let's do that, and let's assign this to new service password. Okay, great. Let's save our file here, and then let's go back to our terminal and clear this and run our program one more time and see if this is working as we expect it to. So colin@example.com, password, go skate. Okay, we would like to add new service credentials. The service will be AWS, and then the username we'll just say Colin, and then the password let's just say ASDF. We'll hit enter on that, and we see now that we have successfully added a new service to our password vault hash that points to a hash itself, which contain the keys for username and password, both with the values that we entered over here on the command line. Okay, let's wrap this video up by filling out this the code for this second case here. This Win2 selection is made. So the unfortunate news I have for you is that with the current state of things, when we run our program on the terminal and we select one to add a new service to our password vault, once our program exits, that information is gone. It is not saved anywhere. We're not connected. We're not writing that information to a file that we can retrieve it from later. We're not stored in a database. We're not storing it anywhere. So that information is gone after our program is done. So in order to fill out this next example, we're going to have to go ahead and populate our password vault at the top here with some default credentials here. Now in the future, I'd like to continue working on this project over some more of the next lessons that we'll cover in this section of the learning path here, to get it to the point to where we can write this information to a file and retrieve it later, so that we can actually save this information, just to get practice with writing the files and creating programs. And I think this will be a good project for to build upon or to iterate on and make a little bit cleaner with some things that we'll see and learn about in the future, and just also persist the information that we're getting from our users. But in any case, let's go ahead and get started on filling out this last section and ending out this video here. So first thing I want to do is this print, or this P line right here that we were using in the last section to print out the end result here. We don't need that anymore. Let's go ahead and get rid of this for now. And then let's go to the top of this file. And inside this hash here, let's go ahead and, as we were doing in the terminal, let's go ahead and add those same credentials in here so that we have something to work with here. So now again, we could do AWS like this, right? And like do the hash rocket syntax and all this. We saw that in the last video. But I want to use symbols here so that we can see or retouch on some things that we've seen in previous episodes, and maybe even some new ones. So let's do a key of AWS right here, and then we'll point that to a hash, and then inside that hash we need a username key, and then let's set that equal to the value of Colin. We'll do all lowercase there, and then we need a password key here, and then let's just do ASDF just like this. Now some folks can like to have hashes like this on multiple lines. You can do that here. You can leave it all on one line. Some people add a space here at the beginning before this key and at the end of the hashes and stuff. We're going to keep it simple for right now and just leave it like this. So we have a starting point here. We have our top level hash, which is referenced by the password vault constant. Inside that hash, we have one top level key. That is the key of AWS. That points to a hash itself. And then inside that hash, we have two key value pairs, username that points to Colin, password that points to ASDF. So Now with that, going back down here, we can start filling out our second, when the option is 2 here. So let's start off with a print statement and just prompt the users for please enter the name of the service you wish to access credentials for, and just like that. And then we will now again use gets.chomp to get input from that user. So we'll say, let's set that to a local variable called requested service, okay, equals gets.chomp, just like that. Okay, so now we got that. So now the next thing we need to do is we need to use this requested service name that's being passed in from or entered by the user on the command line. We need to use that to get that information out of the hash. Now, what we need to be mindful of here is that in this hash, we set those keys this way. They're not string keys. They're more of the symbol keyword argument style, which we'll see about keyword arguments in a later episode when we talk about methods. But it's more in that syntax of setting up key value pairs. So what that means is that, as we saw at the end of the hash video, if we try to use the string AWS to get the username and the password out of that password vault hash, it is not going to work, because in that password vault hash, we do not have a string for AWS. We have this symbol right here, so we would need a symbol. We would need to convert the input from the user to a symbol in order to look this up. So that's why I wrote this way, because I wanted us to see about how we go about doing this conversion here. So with that, back over here where we were doing our initial work here, we have the requested service name right here. And actually, let's go ahead and make it requested service name, the name of the variable. It seems like a little bit of a more descriptive name. Requested service name. So we want to use that now to key into the password vault hash here. So we have our password vault hash. We're going to open up some square brackets here, and then we're going to use requested service name to key into that. Now remember, I just said a moment ago that this is going to be coming in as a string, so we need to convert this to a symbol. The way we do that is that Ruby has a toSym method for strings here. So it'll take that string and convert it to a symbol. So it will go from, for example, from this, foo to this for us. Ruby will take care of that by calling that method right here. So let's go ahead and use P to print out the result of that call. And let's go back into our terminal here and see what we get when we do this. So back over in our terminal, let's clear all this out. Let's run our program again. Let's go ahead and log in here. Colin at example.com. Okay, password is go skate. Okay, I would like to retrieve an existing service's credentials. So let's enter 2 right here. Hit enter. Please enter the, you probably caught that when I was typing it out. I have the wrong prompt right here. So I'm going to go ahead and exit the program. If you ever need to exit your program like this for any reason, you can hit Control C. So I'm going to leave that little error in here so that we can fix this. So let's see, please enter we want to change this to name of the service you wish to access credentials for. Okay, let's save this. Let's go back over to our terminal here and run our program again. So we'll log in, Colin at example.com, password go skate. Okay, what would you like to do? 2, please enter the name of the service you wish to access credentials for. Perfect. So I'm going to type AWS here. And now when we do that, we see that we get back the hash containing the associated credentials for our AWS service. This is great. Now we could clean that up, the output up a little bit if we wanted to here. So what we could do is let's go get rid of that P statement here. So we can say, let's see, let's do credentials. Let's make a local variable credentials equals that. We'll assign that to point to the result of this bit of code here. Okay, so this credentials local variable will point to the hash of the credentials for our AWS service. So right here. Okay, so now what we can do is we could take credentials here and we could iterate through the key value pairs of the credentials and show them in a nicely formatted way for the user. So to start, let's do this. Let's do, I'm give myself some space here so that we can easily see this on some line breaks here. Let's do a puts call and say here are the credentials for, and then let's go ahead and interpolate the requested service name. Okay, so here are the credentials for, in this case, it'll be AWS. And then now what we can do is we can take our credentials and we can call our .each method on it. Now, I think this will only be the second time in this section that we've seen a block, but that's okay. We'll have a whole section on it in the future, but I want to start introducing it more now so that you can start to get some more exposure to it. And we will do a do in style block here. So let's say do, the keyword do. Now we need to open up some vertical pipes, open and close them. That will be where we declare some block arguments. And then inside of the vertical pipes, we can define those block arguments. So we could say key val, we could say kv if you wanted to. I think it's a little more helpful to have some descriptive names, but they can be anything you want. So let's do key val, okay, just like that. And then we need to make sure that we end our block with the end keyword right here. So this end corresponds to this do that started the block. And now inside of here, now we can print out the results to the user. So let's do puts, and then we could say, do some interpolation here and say key, and then a space, and then we'll interpolate val, just like that. All right, so let's go ahead and save this file. Let's go back to our terminal, clear this out, and let's run our program one more time to end out this video and make sure everything works here. So let's go ahead and log in, colin@example.com, go skate. Okay, and we want to retrieve credentials, so let's enter number 2. It's going to prompt us, please enter the name of the service you wish to access credentials for. We want AWS, we'll hit enter on that, and now we see a nicely formatted message sent back to us saying here are the credentials for AWS. Our username for that service is Colin. Our password for that service is ASDF. So this is great. This is working out nicely. Okay, so real quick, I want to share a couple other things about conditionals. So for this, we're going to not work in our program file that we've been working in. We're going to hop into IRB here. So let's say we have a local variable called number. And let's set that equal to, I don't know, say 5. Okay. So one thing we can do is we can do our if conditional. So we can say if number, and then integers have the method odd on there. So we can do if odd puts odd. Now we could just run this in this conditional. Right, so we see that we get odd. So this is just like we saw in our video here. We also saw that we could do an else thing, or an else branch, and then do some other code, and then say something else. And since 5 is odd, this will not run, but we can set that up. The other thing we can do is we can do another comparison check. So we can combine these two keywords after the if branch here with a keyword called else if. Now, so the way we would write that is let's make number an even number. Let's say number 2, and then let's say if number dot odd question mark. We'll put odd, and then what we can do is else if, just like this. It's else if minus this last e in else. Which is a little odd, I would say at first, but you get used to it over time. So here we can write another check like we did here, but this time we could do number dot even like this, puts even, okay, and then we can still put an else branch right here. Else puts I don't know, for example. Oops. I need to end off my string here, and then let's end off our whole if else conditional here. So if we run this code now, we should hit our else if branch because we assigned the local variable number to the value of 2. So if number.odd, this check is going to evaluate to false here, so this code will not execute. Else if number.even, this will return true, so therefore this branch will execute. So we should see puts even, and then that will be the end of things. So indeed we do see even return to us. So that's else if. I just wanted to show you that so you can build out really long conditional checks here. You could have as many else ifs as you want, but you can only have one if clause. So you can only write if once, but you can have several else ifs, and you can only do one else. So something to be mindful of there. Okay, so let's clear out our terminal here, and let's look at our number variable here. So number points to 2. So if we have a simple check that we want to do that can fit on one line, we can use something called a ternary operator instead of writing out a long form if do something else do this statement. So we can use the ternary operator like so. So for example, let's say we want to check if number is odd. If it's odd, we want to return a string of odd. Otherwise, we want to return a string of even from it, right? So what we can do is we would say number dot odd, for example, question mark. That's the method, the full method. Then what we do is to set up our ternary operators, we do a space after that expression to be evaluated. We put another question mark, and then we'll put a space. And then the first thing we'll do here is we'll write odd, okay? And then we'll do a space, put a colon, another space, and then we'll write our string of even. So what we're doing here is that the code on the left side of this colon here is what will be returned from this front part of this ternary operator if this expression is true. So if number.odd returns true, we're going to return this. Otherwise, if number.odd is false, we are going to return this. Okay? So if we hit enter here, we see that what is returned to us is the string of even. So that's the ternary operator. I wanted to make sure to show you the additional else if clauses that we can use and this ternary operator. So the ternary operator, again, is really nice if you have a really simple check you want to do that kind of lines up with something you would normally do in an if-else statement. So it's a much more compact syntax to write those simple conditional checks like that. So like I mentioned, I think over the course of some of these next few videos in this section, we'll come back, we'll clean up some of this code as we learn about new things, and hopefully keep enhancing this program so that we can start persisting some credentials to files for us that we can retrieve at a later time when we come back and run our program. So with that, we'll end this little introduction to control flow here. I would suggest to, if you have some free time, try to maybe recreate this program yourself from scratch without looking at the code. See how far you can get. Maybe have it open in a different window or off to the side or minimized so that you can reference it again easily if you get stuck. But I would definitely say to try to build either this program again or something similar on your own, and start trying to get a lot of these commands and like kind of the thought process into both your fingers and in your mind, and see what kind of fun programs you can create. Also, if you create a program separate from this, make sure to share it with us. I'd love to see what you do on your own if it's not doing this from scratch. The more things you build on your own, the faster you'll pick this stuff up. So with that, I'll leave it here, and I will see you in the next video.